Omakase, the life and words of author M. Karen. If this is our first time meeting each other, let me give you a brief introduction. My name is Max. I write every day. I write books for a living. I was born and raised in Mexico up until the age of 13 when I moved to the US. My pronouns are they, them, and, of course, my native tongue is Spanish. So, if you happen to also be a non-native English speaker and you worry about your ability to write in English, worry not. As with any other thing, it takes practice and dedication, and I know that you can make it there. And welcome to Omakase, episode number 10, my writing advice and inspiration podcast. I will come off right off the start today to let you know that today's episode might be a little on the shorter side. I'm having a really busy weekend. And I have family coming over, and they will be arriving really soon. So I'm making use of the little quiet time that I have in the house and the studio before that happens. If you are unfamiliar with the show, it's broken into 3 segments: my update, viewer questions, and the prompt. Though today I don't have a writing prompt as much as I have a conversation to bring forward, something that you can ask about your characters and about yourself. Of course, before we jump into anything else, housekeeping. There's 3 things I want you to know today. 1, I already told you about. Today's episode will hopefully be on the shorter side. Hopefully, if I don't ramble, though you know that I can do that. And I do that very often. I'm doing it right now. So we'll see. So you know, all the good plans of mice and men and other Steinbeck novels. Is that what that saying is about? So, we'll see how that turns out. The other thing I want to let you know is that the track you hear at the beginning and at the end of the show is titled Dream of Green by the OC Jazz Collective and OCRemix.org. That is a wonderful website full of free-to-download video game remixes, and I recommend you go check them out. They have tons of collections, and I just love those guys. Perfect writing music. And the last thing I want to say, I mentioned this last week, but it is completely live now. I have a Ko-fi page that is ko-fi.com/mkaren. If you, for whatever reason, don't want to support me through Patreon, you are free to send me a one-time donation through Ko-fi. There should be a link to it in the description down below. If you do happen to buy me a coffee, which is just a one-time donation, it can also be a cup of tea. I will give you a shout out on the next week's episode. I'm on a week delay because of early access to Patreon, so if you don't hear a shout out right away, I can assure you it's coming. So, link to that in the description down below. All support is very appreciated. But now, let's dive right in. First segment of the show, my week, my update. What have I been doing? What have I been writing? What have I been consuming when it comes to video games, media, movies, books, shows? Today, this week, it's been mostly one particular show. I hinted at it last week, but I'll give you more details on that in a moment. First off, what have I been doing? I have been caught in a whirlpool of emotions and work. A lot of things have had to happen really quickly. And as I mentioned, you can always count on the random encounters of life to get in the way. So I spent a little bit of time a couple of days ago reformatting my daily routine. And this is something that I don't talk about a lot. But I feel like it's something that everybody has to deal with, and since I'm a very, pardon the pun, a min-max kind of person, I've always been focused on updating my daily routine, and this is something that either A, you have never heard me talking about if you're new, or if you've been following me forever, you're like, Max, you change your routine like every month. Yeah. I am always trying to improve. I'm actually always keeping track of how long it takes me to do things to maximize the time that I have, because we all have the same 24 hours in the day. And I'm not saying that I keep track of how long it takes me to do dishes, but I definitely do track things like, okay, you know, how can I make the most out of my daily walk? How can I make the most out of the little time I have here and there in between tasks? And that also came as a part of me wanting to spend more time making books. I don't know if I'm going to make a post on Patreon or just a post on Twitter, but I am actually going full force. I was going to use another word that sounded really silly. So I'm going to go full force with getting books out. It's something that I've been wanting to get back to in forever. I've had a really crazy last year. I mean, I got married like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago from my point of view. I've been busy. I've been really busy, and that has taken its toll on my books. So I'm going full force, focus on my books, and that may mean that there may be delays on these episodes. Hopefully not. I'm working a week in advance because my patrons get these podcasts early. So I have a bit of a buffer, so I hope that that won't actually happen. But if it does, that's life. Books take priority. I want to get more stories out there. I have all of these manuscripts that are written. A couple of them are revised. I just have to get them out there. And I want to release a bunch of books. It's literally what I have on my wallpaper. I want to fill the world with stories. It's what I want to do. So we're going to get a bunch of small books, big books, medium books. I want to get a bunch of stuff out there. So that's been my focus. I've been focusing a lot on writing and revising and working on those steps. And that came as part of my kind of monthly checking up on my stats and what I've been doing. And consider this a great reminder to slow down. It's okay to slow down every once in a while. Look at your process. Look at how you're making the most out of the time you have. Because again, we all have the same 24 hours. I do, you do, Beyonce does, everybody has the same 24 hours. And part of that time is already partitioned, with real life things. And if you have school, if you have children, if you have other responsibilities, all that time is already partitioned off. You can't spend less time looking after your kids. So you have to find out the blocks in your schedule where you can sneak in extra productivity. And not only productivity, of course, but also time for yourself, because we are not machines. And if I can give you one really quick tip for making the most out of your time and your life, round up when allocating time for tasks. Do not assume that if you have an hour of work, you will get exactly 1 hour of work, because something always comes up. Round up. Round up. If you only have an hour, allocate 40 minutes of work. Allocate half an hour of work, depending on how hectic your life is. I got that syllable eventually. But yeah, I've been spending a lot of time reformatting my schedule. I actually spent today following the new routine, and this is gonna sound crazy, but I actually have a schedule down to 15 to 30 minute chunks. And I was keeping track of my watch, and I'm okay, my walk is exactly 30 minutes. If I walk this distance, turn around at this particular fire hydrant, and I turn around. Is it a fire hydrant or a water hydrant? I mean, you use the firemen and fire trucks use them, but they are not. A property of the fire hydrant is not that it is on fire. Anyhow, don't mind me getting into editor mode there for a second. If I turn at that fire hydrant and I walk back, that's exactly 30 minutes. And little stuff like that. And I'm okay, how much time would I need to take care of my morning tasks, have breakfast with my wife and stuff like that. To make the most, because life will always be hectic. Life will always be complicated. Listen, I didn't know I had family over until last night. So it's the sort of stuff. What do we do when life throws a punch at our face? We roll with that punch and we get back into the ring. That is how life works. But now, I promised a smaller update. So I almost kind of want to time myself. I want to talk about the show that I've been watching. I want to say that I've been watching it over the course of last week, but that's not true. We watched 4 episodes one night, and then we binge-watched the rest of Season 1 of My Hero Academia. My wife and I have been watching this anime about superheroes. And I want to take a second just to talk about it. I know it's anime, so already 90% of people listening don't care. And that's okay. I don't blame you. I run another channel where I talk about anime and video games, and I can assure you, I run an anime channel. Most anime is not very good. It's not very well told. Part of that is the audience that it's aimed at. Part of that are the writers that create that sort of stuff. But we gave My Hero Academia a chance. And I have to say that against all odds, this show about superheroes, young people who want to be superheroes, has actually outright surprised me. It has blown my expectations out of the water. A quick history lesson. There are genres when it comes to Japanese comics, manga, or Japanese animation, anime. The two main big genres, you could call them, are shonen and shoujo. Shoujo meaning girl, shonen meaning boy. Content that is aimed at young men. My Hero Academia is a superhero story with a central character who happens to be a young boy. That manga and that anime was meant for a shonen demographic. Young boys. Or teenage boys. And this is the sort of stuff that is always a problem because stories like these tend to be kind of... I don't want to say they tend to add to the toxic nature of masculinity, but they kind of do, unfortunately so. We can go on for days about the nature of male characters and their inability to just talk about their problems to solve them, but that's another conversation for another day. I cut myself. That was a rant right there. But My Hero Academia has surprised me because our main character, Deku, is a very emotional character. He feels powerless, and he is actually, technically speaking, powerless. Our two main characters, main focus characters, Deku and the greatest superhero of all time, All Might, both have inherent weaknesses to themselves. Things that make them, in a way, miserable, but things that, in spite of them being immediate flaws, do not stop them from seeking their dreams and pushing forward. The number of times that I have felt emotional resonance from Deku's strife, a young man in a world where everyone has a superpower and he doesn't have a superpower. He never got one. But he wants to be a hero. He idolizes heroes. He loves them. He writes about them. He wants to become one. And it's not just a matter of, I want to do it for fame. He actually wants to help people. In spite of being powerless, he jumps into danger to help people. And to contrast that, we have the greatest superhero of all time, All Might, who is the shining beacon of hope. The superhero whose mere existence lowers, crime rates throughout the entire world. And he has, not to spoil anything, because, you learn about it in episode 2 or something, but, he has an immediate weakness, where you get to see him at his lowest, where you get to see that in spite of him being this great hero, he is still a human being who is mortal, and fallible, and sometimes short-sighted. And the fact that this kind of character development is coming from shonen is mind-blowing. The whole time we were watching, we binge-watched all of Season 1, all first 13 episodes in 2 sittings. 4 episodes once, and then 9 episodes the second sitting. That's just how much fun we were having. And the whole time I'm watching it, and I'm like, was this seriously in Shonen Jump? I think it was in Shonen Jump, which is the biggest manga publication for boys in Japan. And I'm like Deku sometimes is so powerless that he just cries. And I'm like, a character's focused for a young male demographic showing emotions and crying because of how powerless he feels. I'm like, my brain is just exploding everywhere just from the fact that a character like this exists. And it's not only just a one-note thing. He is a solid character, a fantastic point of view. I am freaking out right now over how well executed Deku and All Might are in this show. I don't want to give you a glowing recommendation because it's still anime and there's still things that I don't particularly like. There is one female character design that I'm just waving my finger at and I'm like, no, she wouldn't dress like that. That's dumb. There is, of course, the immediate antagonistic character in, I forget his name. They call him Kachan. I don't like him, and I know that I'm not supposed to like him, but he is not a very nice person, and although you get more of him later, I still feel that his introduction was just so ham-fisted and blunt that I'm like he's already in the negatives. I will never like him. I feel like he's just not a nice person or a good person. And in spite of wanting to be a hero, he's doing it for the wrong reasons. So I feel like you're playing behind the 8 ball if you want me to agree with him. But other than that, the first season was a ride, and I would be lying to you if I told you that when we finished episode 13, I didn't want to just pop in the first episode of the next season. But if you're familiar with anime, then you probably have already seen My Hero Academia. There's 3 seasons of it out right now. If you're unfamiliar with anime, I don't think it's I mean, it might not be the worst place to start. I don't know. I will leave that up to you. The first episode is pretty good. But anyhow, I promised I was going to go short, and yet here I am talking about fiction and going on for way too long. Let's jump into the sponsors for this show. Omakase is a show funded by you, the awesome viewers. Whether you are pledging to my Patreon page and getting cool perks along the way, or just treating me to a cup of coffee with a one-time donation. Patreon, of course, is the main place where you can support me and get cool perks. By pledging just $1 a month, you get these podcasts and my monthly workshop a week and a month, respectively, before they go live on YouTube, and on iTunes and on all the other platforms. And of course, the more you pledge, the more perks you get, like shoutouts, copies of my super duper secret zine, and of course, the big super duper shoutout in the middle of the show. I want to give a big shoutout to my super sponsor, Atlac. Atlac has a DeviantArt page. You can learn more about them, their art, and their writing over at deviantart.com/Atlac. That is AHTILAK. And of course, a shout out to the rest of my patrons pledging $5 a month or up. A Howard, Amelia, Angela, Brenda, Caitlin, Gilbert Goodrow. No one's yelled at me about getting that name wrong, so I'm gonna assume I nailed it. Irina Phoenix, Joe, Lacey, Mark Maruska, Nicola, Pat Eichson, Philly Kelly, Polycraft Tool, Rain Misoa, Soul Muse, and Synexia. Let's get back to the show with the viewer questions. Every week, I take 1, 2, maybe 3 questions from the comments of the video on Twitter and also on my Tumblr page, and I feature them on the show. Technically speaking, today we have 3 questions, but I'm doing something really weird with them, so tag along. The first question I have is about revision. I mentioned before that the hardest part of the process is writing the book. Getting that book on paper, writing the whole thing, I feel is the hardest part. Because you're working from nothing, because you're creating the story before you. But sometimes, revision can also be pretty hard. I have a writerly friend who has no issue writing the first draft. That they can get done, that they can overcome. Revision is their biggest foe. Because whenever they start changing, to revise the story to make it all make sense, they keep changing it and changing it and changing it. And they see no end to that spiral. And they mean changing elements, story elements, themes. When does it stop? What can they do to get better to just finish editing that story and move on to the next phase of the process? I don't want to drop just the word perfectionism because I don't know if that is at the core of their problem. I didn't get enough context to just make a judgment call on that. But I feel, from my own experience, that part of that was the main problem. And perfectionism is... it's a tough demon to exercise. Because from one point of view, you can consider it a matter of quality, of wanting to make your story the best it can. But it can also become, as this poor writerly friend has experienced, a bottomless pit of just redoing the same thing, feeling not confident at all about what you've done, and repeating the process again and again and again. Looking back over my own experience, I had to give this one a little thought. And I'm wondering, what would the best course of action be? Because I feel that from my point of view, this is something that I have touched on only lightly because of the mindset that I have when I go into revising a novel. I have done it more than once, so part of me understands the process. And I can totally understand if you have spent years trying to get that book written, that the idea of just, revising it, making it good and just sending it out to the world, or rather just sending it out to the world, might be the most terrifying thing of all time. And I get that. I absolutely understand where you're coming from. But I think that there is, I don't want to say a cure-all, but there is a medicine for perfectionism that just a little thought that I take whenever I find myself going in circles. And that is that we as writers, we as people who are continuously taking part in a skill, in a particular task, in a passion, in a talent, you continue to improve forwardly as long as you keep doing it. You're always improving, you're always getting better. And I completely understand that you may be looking over your story and you're fixing it, and you just keep looking for things to fix, and you keep looking for things that may be wrong. And that's not inherently a bad thing. But you have to let go of this story someday. There's books that have been out for years now that I wrote, and a part of me dreads the reality of going back to read them, because I know that I have improved. I know that I've gotten better. That's just a fact. I've been continuing to write and revise, and that's the way a skill like writing works. Writing is a verb, it's a thing you do, and as long as you do it, you're getting better at it. Do I want to go back and revise all of my old books so that they're now fitting to what my skill level is now? Absolutely not. That's silly. Why? Because my skill is always improving. I'm always getting better at it. I'm always improving on my writing and revision skill. So the idea of going back to patch over old books is, I don't want to say nonsensical, but it is definitely short-sighted. The books that I'm writing right now are better than the ones I wrote then. And the books that I'm revising right now are better than the ones I revised back then. That's just the way it works. So dear viewer, going in circles, going down that spiral, that abyss that never stops, looking for things to fix, wanting to make that story perfect. I think, honestly, what helps me when I go into revision is to come in with a plan. A plan not to make the story perfect. If you've been paying attention to the language that I use a very specific language for this, is not to make the story perfect, because perfection doesn't exist. Perfection now won't be perfection tomorrow, and that's why you're going in that circle. You want the story to be perfect, to be one particular way, so that it stands the test of time. But time corrodes everything. The great pillars of humanity will fall if left to their own devices against the ever-encroaching tide that is time. When I go into revision, my goal is very simple. I want to make the story that I wrote, I want to make it the best it can possibly be. Not perfect. The best. The mental exercise that I always do is that I want to be able to stand in front of a podium 10 years from now and be able to read that story before a crowd confidently, without self-editing myself, without looking at something and realizing, oh my god, there's a mistake here. How did this mistake slip by for 10 years? The goal is to make the story so solid, so sound, so effective in its narration and dialogue and description, that in spite of things that will be tarnished by time, it is still a good story. Just the same way that we look at the statues of the civilizations that came before us, their relics, their architecture, we do not get to see it in its prime. We get to look at it and see what made it beautiful. That is the goal I have in mind. That's why I don't do rewrites. I don't just rewrite the whole story again. I revise. I read through what I wrote. I make sure my sentences are clear. I make sure the color makes sense, that the narrator never contradicts themselves. I make the story as solid as I can. And throughout the process, I read it out loud in front of a mirror, and I pretend I'm in front of a crowd. And I read it with the same mentality of Max from 10 years from now, who's going to be touching that book, looking at it, holding it, opening page 1, and reading it before a world of strangers. I never want to self-doubt my own stories. I never want to doubt what I wrote. I never want to look at my stories and think to myself, man, I should have really just put in the extra time to make sure that it read good. And read it with confidence. Not because it's perfect. It will not be perfect. It can't be perfect. Don't even think about silly stuff like that. But I will be able to read it with confidence. Because I did the best that I could. I made the most out of my time. And I made a story so solid, so clear, so concise, so colorful, that even 10 years after, I can read it with peace in my heart and on my mind. I meant this to be a more technical question, but that's what happens. I would like to inspire you to go into revision with the goal in mind to make it the best it can be. And this is why I don't recommend rewriting, because you can end up spending a lot of time in that cycle. Revise. Rewrite only the sentences that need to be rewritten. Add what is missing. Take out what doesn't belong there. Next month, right now, by the time this goes up, there should be a video on my revision style guide on Patreon, early for whoever pledges at least $1 and up. But it'll go up public next month, so you have that to look forward to if you want just a quick glance at my quick style guide, like the things that I just look into when I'm going through my first passes of a revision. And I hope that helped. I went a little long, and I know I went in and out of inspirational and technical advice. I hope it helps. I hope that just, knowing my own mindset can help you create your own mindset. Okay? And now we have 2 weird questions. One that is really quick, because I'm just literally going to link you to another thing I made. I had a viewer asking me for tips and recommendations for writing LGBTQ plus characters. I just so happen to have put up a guide just about that on YouTube a couple months back. I think it came out in June. I didn't plan it. I completely forgot Pride Month was in June. It just happened to go up on that month. I go on great lengths about it, so if anybody is also concerned or would like advice on how to tackle writing an LGBTQ plus character, then there's advice for you right there. I go over everything. Especially, I even go into, the use of the word queer, which I don't particularly mind. It is the word that me and my friends identify with. But that is a choice that you have to make carefully, because not everybody identifies with that particular word. I can go on about the history of disenfranchised groups using the words meant to insult them as words of empowerment and encouragement, but that's another conversation for another day. I will leave a link with all of my thoughts in the description down below. You can just click on that and it'll take you to the video, and that will just tell you everything you need to know. Like, even if I give you the cliff notes, I feel like you would just be better if you watch the full 25-minute workshop that I have. And now, I told you it was a weird question. It was the weirdest way of tackling it. I'm I want to talk about it on the show, but do I just talk about it for 25 minutes? Do I repeat everything I already said? Check out the workshop. I will walk you through everything. So now, as for the final question of the day, we're going to bleed into the next segment as well. We're going to transition between the two of them as soon as I bring up the question. We're gonna get a little real. We're gonna have to ask big, hard questions about ourselves and our characters, but you're here for that. You're here to talk about writing. You want a space to talk about writing, and a space to just be creative and to think about the creative process. So here we go. I got a question. It wasn't really a question, it was more of a comment from a dear viewer, just like you. And I had the feeling that they were down on their luck. They've been having a really rough time. The random encounters of life, you know. There's never just one set of bad news. They're always followed by more bad news and more bad news. That's the way it goes. This writerly friend asked, how do I know if I am not meant to be a writer? Now, at this point, some of you are already formulating / guessing what my answer for that would be. It doesn't matter whether you're fated to be a writer or not. Writing is a thing you do. So by doing it, you improve and you get better. Those are the things that I would say. But I've had an exercise in the back of my mind, and I thought I would bring it into the foreground today. So, let's move over to the third segment of the show. Generally, in the third segment, I would give you a prompt, a weird story idea, but today we have an exercise. A simple question. How do you know if you're meant to be a writer? Is it about loving to write? Is it about the feelings that you feel, the things that you see, something special in your DNA? No, it's all nonsense. And I don't think there's a way to know if you're meant to be a writer. But there's a question that I can ask that maybe will give you insight, that maybe will help you figure out things for yourself. And that exercise is a very simple one. Let's pretend you had a vision, you had a dream, and you have this revelation that tells you that you're meant to be a writer. Let's pretend that actually happened. I have a question for you. If you knew, if you had a vision, if you had a dream, if you had a conversation with a talking bush, or if a person from the future showed up in a time machine and told you you're meant to be a writer. Question. If you had this knowledge, would you work harder or would you slack off? Think about it. And don't think about the fabric of time and, the way that timelines work. That's not the point of this question. The point of this question is to put forward the idea that as human beings who are looking for assurance and affirmation, we want to know that we're on the right path. We want to know that we're doing the right thing. We want to know that we're not wasting our time. But the question is this. If a magic voice told you that you're meant to be a writer, would that inspire you to keep going, or would that inspire you to take it easy because you're meant for success? In the past, I've brought up this argument, and I feel that it can serve as a test of character. I don't want to make big, bold statements right now. I don't want to, insult anybody. But I can't help but wonder what kind of person, upon learning that, would choose to slack off, to take it easy, to, not dedicate as hard to their passion because they know that they will succeed. And, not talking about the nature of timelines and all that stuff, but, it troubles me. I've done this for a while, and I've met a lot of writers, and I've met writers who, and I guess I'm making the hard calls right now, I have met writers who wanted to get something out of their writing. I've met writers who were clearly not in the class, who were clearly not in the writing group, because they liked telling stories. They were in there because they wanted something from the writing. They wanted something out of it. And that's not to say that that's inherently a bad thing. I've always kind of felt that if you're doing the writing because, you want fame or you want someone to respect you, as a person said in class once, it just seems to me a little silly. Because no one respects writers. No, but I think there's something that has to be said for the other people. The people who, upon knowing what lies in store, knowing what's in the cards, they would work harder. I want to be a person like that. I want to be that kind of person. And nobody knows what lies in store. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, or the day after that, or a year from now. But I wonder if it would make a difference if we did. If you knew you were destined to be a writer, would you work harder? Or would you take it easy? I want to be the former. I want to be the kind of person who works harder. Even harder. Because I love stories. I love writing books. I love being the first person who gets to experience that other world. That other somewhere and someone. Full of someones and somebodies. Looking for some things in some places. That's fun to me. And I love it. And I would be lying to you if I told you that I'm doing this writing thing because I want something out of it. I've always been really, really straightforward. The money that comes is good. But I love telling stories. And by the time a book goes to sale, I've already gotten what I wanted out of it. I've gotten to enjoy that story and to make it the best. And the people who get to read it and enjoy it as well, that's a bit of a bonus. I would like to inspire you today to be the former. To work hard. Pretend you've had that vision. Pretend that someone told you. Pretend that you know for certain that you will be successful. And work 10% harder. 20% harder. Work more than you have to. Dedicate yourself harder to your passions. Do more in less. Write recklessly. Revise mercilessly. I want to be that kind of person. And day by day, maybe I'll get there. And I hope that you do as well. And welcome. I hope that wasn't too real. I mean, I think I gave you a warning. I hope I gave you a warning. But it's a conversation that I've been wanting to have forever. And it came up with a writerly friend, What does it matter if you're meant to be a writer or not? Hard work is all it takes. It's always been about hard work. There are no shortcuts. Being fated to be a writer doesn't mean anything if you don't write, if you don't tell stories, if you don't create recklessly and refine your stories mercilessly. And sometimes people forget that all it takes is hard work. It is always hard work. Everyone's looking for shortcuts. Everyone's looking for quick solutions and quick fixes. Band-aids they can put over their problems. But that's not how real life works. The number one thing that has ever worked, that has ever made things happen, was hard work. And I hope today I've inspired you to commit yourself to be the former. Even if your future self visits you to tell you that you are meant to be the greatest writer of all time. Work harder. Dedicate yourself fully to your projects, your stories, and your passions. If anything, because that sounds like a wonderful life to live. Okay? I hope you have a lovely week between now and the next time we meet again. And thank you for watching. We're now going to move over to the end of the video / end of the podcast. You're free to tune out if you want. This is the sillier part of the video, where I give shoutouts to every single one of my patrons who pledged to me over on patreon.com/mkieran. Anyone pledging $1 and up gets a shoutout and gets me to butcher their name. Last week I did no cuts, and guess what? This week, no cuts. No cuts. Get ready for me to make bad jokes that are not funny, and not edit myself taking a sip of tea to freshen up, to revive my throat, because I've been talking for almost an hour. A big thank you to all of my patrons. And this would be the part where I would also give shoutouts to people, buying me cups of coffee. No one has yet. I think it's because that episode went up like yesterday. But that's okay. A big thank you to all of the wonderful people. A. Howard, Atalak, Amanda Stevens, Amelia, Amy Palmer. I clinked my cup, but I will not edit that. From here on, these are all fully unedited. You get full silly Max. You got inspirational Max, you got technical Max, you got Max talking about anime. Now you get full-on silly Max. Unedited. Did I already say Amelia? Amelia! Amy Palmer! Angela! Aniexo Hoshi! Biting the Sun! Everybody's favorite, Blarg! Their name is not everybody's favorite, Blarg. It's just Blarg. But I just love that name. I just love that name. One day they're gonna change it. One day they're not gonna be Blarg anymore. I'm gonna be like, what happened? What happened to Blarg? When's Blarg coming back? Brenda, C.E. Richards, Caitlin, and the other Caitlin. There's 2 Caitlins now. Neither of you have last names. Cannibal Lily. You don't have to add a last name. I like saying Caitlin and the other Caitlin, because you guys don't know which one is which. See, that's the trick right there. See, that's the way. That's the trick. You see. Cannibal Lily, Carrie-Ann Eccleston, Kathy Lindsay, Christiane, Christine Dennis, Kristen Lofton, Citro, Clem Pastor, Carissa Glasheen. Oh my god, the last names are getting cut off. There you go. Dwayne Jackson, Eleanor. Oh man, Eleanor's back. Freaking love Eleanor. Sometimes. Longtime friend Eleanor has a very particular aesthetic, and sometimes when I'm out shopping, with my wife, we stop by places and we're like, that right there, that's Eleanor aesthetic. That right there. Just big aliens, big bug-eyed aliens. Eleanor aesthetic. Erasos, Joffrey, Gilbert Gaudreau, Heather Tasker, Irina Phoenix. No cuts. No cuts. No cuts. Janosch Hibatsky, Jaytana Kirkwood, Jeffrey James Williams, Joe, Juan Nunes, K.M. Anderson, Kameshwar Rao Shaluri, Kaylee Kiel, and Kid Lee. And of course, Neo Patron joining us for the 2nd week in a row, Lacey! And Lear Kello. And, I guess now I have to do it. I made the joke last time. Okay. If this sounds bad in post, I will edit it. Mark Maruska! If that sounds awful in post, I will edit it out. Mark Maruska. See, I yelled it out because his name is in all caps. So that's the joke I made last week. See, that's not funny. That's not funny. I would edit that out because it's not funny. Mary Foster Smith. Nicola. Nicole Grissom. Nicolay. Noam Sahar. Novels and tomes. Pablo. Pat Eichson. I had a friend in high school named Pablo. Sometimes I'm like, how funny it would be if it was that friend Pablo. But considering as how I have not seen anyone from high school in the last undisclosed number of years, I'm pretty sure, unlikely at most. Polycraftwool, Rain Misoa, Raquel Fernandez. I mean, if you want me to read your names in like my, regular Spanish voice, I can do that. Resonance and D. Roa. Shimmer Tails. Sky D. White. I became a robot there for a second. Sky D. White. What if I just read them in like robot voice? Saul Muse. Sylvia. Tella. Sanexia. That wasn't funny. That wasn't funny. See, if I was editing this part of the show, I would have cut that out. Synexia, Thomas Baker, and last but by no means least, Wendy Christopher. Hey everybody, Max here. I hope that today's episode was not too real, and I hope that it wasn't too short. I apologize, I have family over, you know the dealio. And there's probably more background noise this week than there usually is, but it's fine. I hope you had fun. I hope that if anything, I've inspired you to get back into the fray and get more writing done. And I hope, with all of my heart, that between now and the next time we meet again, that you get some writing done.